Hello there, Mad Mike here, and welcome back to the channel. And today we're going to be looking into kind of an interesting news story because I usually like to kind of highlight stuff like this because I actually do kind of enjoy the Lovecraft mythos. I've read some of the stories, I've played a few of the games that are based off of his works, and it's very, very interesting. And, it almost always has kind of that dark and dreary tone. There's usually not a happy ending. It's usually something that's not prototypical of what we see in a lot of today's writing and film. Um, and this is interesting news just because I don't really know how this is going to go because this is a film adaptation of Lovecraft, but it's not directly of one of his works, and that's why I find it kind of interesting. And it's not an autobiography really either. D.B. Weiss and David Benioff, most notably from Game of Thrones, who have signed a monumental deal with Netflix, and they just left Star Wars about a month ago officially. They are both signed on by Warner Brothers to make this Lovecraft film that is based off of a graphic novel called Lovecraft, in which the center character is Lovecraft himself, and he lives in a world where his creations exist. So it's kind of the Cthulhu verse, I guess, that encompasses a lot of his really, his more expansive stories or his more well-known ones, like in The Mountain of Madness or Call of Cthulhu and stuff like that. So it's going to be interesting because we know what happened with the end of Game of Thrones. There's not a lot of love going right now for Benioff and Weiss. A lot of people did not like the ending to that. A lot of people were unsatisfied. A lot of people were not very excited about them getting, a Star Wars trilogy and stuff like that after Season 8 came out. Of course, then the Star Wars trilogy was dropped and they went over to Netflix, which, everybody was kind of like, okay, whatever, they're going over to Netflix. But this is apparently something of a passion project for them, at least from what I can tell, and it's been in development for a number of years. So this is well before the split from Lucasfilm and the season 8 controversy with Game of Thrones. So it just seems like it's coming to fruition now. Now, there's nobody cast in this movie, at least not as of right now. I presume it will be live action. Again, it's being done by a major Hollywood studio with Warner Brothers. And the only thing that I'm kind of concerned about is that they go too cartoony with this. They try to Hollywood it up, and I don't really like that idea, again, when it comes to Lovecraft, because his stories kind of go against the proverbial grain of what Hollywood tends to like to put in their films. I had the video before about, the happy ending, the prototypical Hollywood, classic, 1930s, 40s happy ending to a Hollywood film, happily ever after, the fairy tale type deal. And Lovecraft stories generally do not have that. So it's going to be very interesting to see. Mostly because I can kind of see this going the Goosebumps route, because that kind of has a similar premise, even though it's obviously extremely different in terms of tone. It has a very similar premise to what this graphic novel has. Now, here's the other thing, is that we don't know exactly how faithful to this adaptation they're going to be going. It probably will not be Lovecraft himself in the story. I presume it'll probably be something like, they'll modernize it. They'll put they'll put a modern spin on it. It'll take place in 2020 or 2021 or whenever the movie's going to come out. And they'll try and make it a bit more updated. They're probably not going to set it in the 1910s, or the 1920s when these works were actually being published. But it's going to be interesting to see how the production process of this goes forward, what they plan on doing with this property. From what I can tell from the graphic novel, it was somewhat well received. There were mixed opinions about it, but I don't think that there wasn't anything overwhelmingly bad said about it. So the source material is fairly strong enough to make an adaptation, so I'm not really concerned too much with that. But it is going to be interesting moving forward. When they start casting actors and various things like that, and when we have a now, I don't know if Benioff and Weiss are going to be directing this in any fashion. I assume they're just going to be writing and producing as they normally do. So we'll see how that goes. But this is just kind of an interesting little tidbit of information. But as usual, I want to know what you think, and put your thoughts in the comments below. Do you want to see something like this adapted for screen? Um, do you trust Benioff and Weiss to any degree after the season 8 debacle for Game of Thrones and the Star Wars stuff and what they're planning on doing with Netflix? Do you think this is going to get the attention that it deserves? Or do you just don't care? I'd like to know your thoughts. So again, put them in the comments below. Hit the bell for notifications, hit the like button, subscribe, and remember, I live my life free of compromise. Do you?